Mm. How goes the hour? Good. We got a few seconds. Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. This is Willie Flowers with How Goes the Hour with the NAACP Maryland State Conference. Happy to be here. Happy to get to this Friday at 1 o'clock. I look forward to it. We rock and roll all week, and then we can sit down and talk about some good things happening in the state of Maryland and in your community. As you know, we start out with our monologue. I want to thank our producer for connecting this. William Hunter Blue is always in the background here. But I want to kind of frame this monologue. And usually I go to the world, I go to the nation, I come to Baltimore. But I think over the last week, we have had a few things to jump off that are interesting to me, and I wanted to share them. One is we talked a little about the distraction that I think the Black Mermaid brought about, and, I kind of had my own little conspiracy theory thought about it. I don't want to admit to being a conspiracy theorist, but the reality is sometimes distractions are thrown up to keep you distracted. And lead up to the Woman King, as we all know, the last week or so was controversy about an African American sister being the mermaid, a fictional character. And there was controversy, there was talk, there were discussions that kind of didn't focus on the issues of the day. Now, if as a lead up to the Woman King, we get a substantial story about strong Black women in Africa fighting to to preserve their country. Which we have one narrative about slavery, and that is that they brought us into slavery, and they all that. We didn't know there were people, particularly women, fighting in Africa. And when I went to see the movie, and it's an amazing film, I encourage everyone to see it. There's no reason why you shouldn't see it. It's a period story about Africa. It's a historical fiction about Africa. And there's some controversy about the pieces about Dahomey and them being slave traders themselves. Whatever. The reality is this: that we've seen zillions of films over the years, and I'm going to point at one of them. It's going to open up your eyes to something. One of those films is Gone with the Wind. And Gone with the Wind for white people inspired this antebellum majesty of the South and how beautiful it was. I encourage you to go watch that also so you can see how much of a fiction it was. But the reality was it inspired white people to think that there was some greatness before the Civil War. There was beauty, and there were all these rich white folks and all of that. It was nothing of the sort. There was only a few white people who, I ain't gonna say a few, but everybody white didn't have it going on. But the reality was our people were enslaved. Black African people were enslaved. And the reality also is that struggle, the Civil War, was started out of white ignorance to maintain slavery. And I don't want you to forget that. But that is not the point here. The point is that white people at that time used cinema, from a book called Gone with the Wind to the movie called Gone with the Wind, and it inspired them to think that they were great. Their history and their heritage was taken away by Yankees or by the Unions or by Abraham Lincoln and all that, and inspired them for 100 years to think they had it going on. Well, the reality is they don't have it going on. They're just Americans like the rest of us. And so that leads me into this conversation about the Woman King, and something that's missing from this conversation about why people don't want you to go watch this movie. And I encourage everybody to watch the movie, just like I encourage them to watch Gone with the Wind, so you can be an objective observer of cinema. And most of it is fiction based on some things that are true. The reason I want you to go watch it is that, yes, it's going to be empowering to Black African people, particularly Black girls, so that we can stick our chest out and we can be proud of our legacy despite what we've been through since whatever, the 1800s, 1700s, or when the first slave ship started. There are some things to celebrate in that pain, in that trauma. And our people didn't bow down I just get hacked down or shot down by white people, as they want you to say, to create their appearance of superiority. So in lies the woman king. Yes, we're proud of our Black African heritage. Yes, some of the things are contradictory to what we want to believe. But yes, it's also the case that we can be inspired just like they've been inspired by Spartacus, by all the films that have been created. You can talk about William Wallace and Braveheart. You can talk about The Gladiator. All these are fictions based on some truth. And this film is no differently. And I'm going to close with this. Another reason that they don't want you to watch that film, because it introduces the reality of our ancient African spiritual tradition. It's called Ifa now. It can be called Vodun. It can be called whatever, but it was a piece of our history that inspired us to fight and praise our ancestors who were fighters. And the reality of that, does the great example of it is in Haiti, when our African ancestors in Haiti broke the French to their knees and won their liberation. It became the first story about a country that was liberated and freed themselves without Christianity, without white support, but against the world. They won because they believed in themselves and were inspired by a spiritual tradition that nobody could stop. So that's the other reason, because this film gives you a viewpoint of ancient African spiritual tradition in a way that's positive, in a way that's inspirational, in a way that the French and every other European religious practice tried to stop after the Haitian Revolution. And that's my monologue for today. Go see the film, enjoy it. I want to close with this too, because something came up this week that I didn't know about, and that was the fact that Ken Burns did a very significant 3-series documentary on the Holocaust. And one thing that comes out of that documentary, more than anything, because we know about the Holocaust, I didn't know about a lot of the details of the slaughter and murder of human beings before World War II. But one thing that hit me more than anything about this documentary about the Holocaust, by one of my favorite documentarians, Ken Burns, and that was the fact that the energy that Hitler put about the hate and disgust that he had for Jewish people was the same energy that Trump practiced while he was president, to isolate, to annihilate, and to be xenophobic toward Muslims, toward our brothers and sisters from Mexico, Central America, and South America, just to pass legislation to keep somebody out of this country and to demonize other countries. In Africa, African countries were those two, because he called them shitholes. But to have that as the example of what American presidency is about is as a sick reality. And shame on anybody who supported any of those policies and thought that it was right. And I connected to Hitler because there were Americans who were supporting policies to keep Jews out of this country in that time. And it's the same sick, hateful spirit. And we have to stop it before it gets started again. So that's my monologue for today. I want to introduce our guest today. A lot of people have heard about him. If you are from Baltimore, you know about the legacy of Senator Larry Young, who was on the airwaves, and he was the host of the morning show called the Larry Young Morning Show for almost 30 years, I think. And Larry Young gave up that seat and he passed it over to someone named Carl Nelson, who has been on the show for at least, I guess, 3 months now. And he jumped in, and I was like, how's this guy going to replace Larry Young? But he seems to have had a seamless transition, and he's doing his job. And we're going to interview him today, give him an opportunity to introduce himself. And I already know that the reason he's done such a good job is because he's been doing this for a very long time. So I look forward to hearing more about him on this show. And I want to welcome him to How Goes the Hour. And so, Mr. Nelson, how goes the hour?
It's going great.
Excellent. So, you're in Baltimore now.
Uh-huh.
you've been in a lot of places, and I know because when I came here, I had to come to the quick conclusion I've never been in a place like this. So, how has your transition been the to run the airwaves in the morning in Baltimore City?
Oh, it's been great. The response has been tremendous. We get there's never a week that passes by without an email and letter. And you know, our folks don't write emails and letters. If they don't like you, they don't talk to you. But when they write you and tell you, or email, or text you and say, "Man, doing a great job. Thank you. Refreshing," all that kind of stuff. We get that period since we've been here. So I love Baltimore.
Well, you're doing a good job with the show. I want to thank you for inviting me on like the first or second week you came on board, and gave me an opportunity. I was at the convention. I think I was either at the NAACP National Convention, and I appreciate you even considering us to talk about. It was actually after the primary, and a lot has happened since then. So
Yeah,
we have a lot to talk about. We have a gubernatorial candidate, two of them, and it's kind of shaping up to be somewhat of a interesting election. And I guess I want to hear from you. I mean, one thing I hear consistently is that there's no excitement about this election year, and it's kind of weird because if you know anything about, I'll use the football game analogy.
mhm.
People don't get excited when it's not a close game, even though your favorite team wins. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You got all the equipment, you had a great year. You get to the championship game and you shut it down. You control the game from the beginning to the
Yeah.
end, and people are kind of disappointed. We won, but it wasn't close. It wasn't exciting.
Wasn't competitive.
So my question to you is that what we're seeing? Is it the case that Westmore has it figured out how to win the election? To his credit, he won the primary.
Yeah.
Do you think that he has the machinery in place to pull off this election, even though it's not exciting?
Right, and that's a good way to describe it. West is leading in the polls, but he can't take that for granted. And sometimes the polls will tell you that you're leading. And some people will stay home and say, "Okay, it's in the bag. He's already got it." But we have to be concerned about the proverbial October surprise, and we're going to get that in this particular race. Don't know what it's going to be, but look for his opponent to pull something in a few weeks, because he knows he's trailing in the polls. He's got to do something to upset the apple cart. So watch out for that. What West has to do is to get the turnout. He has to make sure that Baltimore, Baltimore County, and the rest of the entire state turn out and vote. If he does that, he's in.
Right, because there is this. Well, I don't know. Everybody wants to compare. I guess we have to talk about the last two gubernatorials where we had Anthony Brown who came up short,
Right.
and and there was not a tremendous amount of turnout, quite frankly, in his own county of Howard County, and it just kind of went from there. But we have a scenario, and I always had the feeling that Hogan was elected because he was not a politician, and I think that the state of Maryland kind of likes that because
Yeah.
everybody has a little fatigue from folks who all they've done all their life is elected office. And so I think Hogan brought that energy in, and his timing was excellent because we had sat through 8 years of people raising taxes. So it
Mhm.
was easy to. He beat them up on raising taxes. I think 22 or 24 times. He beat them, and he said they even taxed the rain. He was good on the stump.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't think we have that. This candidate that has won the Republican nomination, he has been on the wrong side of history. That's all I'll say.
Yeah.
Anybody who sent buses to the on January 6th is on the wrong side of history, and they shouldn't. We talked about this when I was on your show. That this man should not even have won the nomination, but since he did, we're gonna have a good time.
Yeah.
So
And, he's not the only one. Trump's got a bunch of candidates across the country and they're concerned now because what Trump was talking about and got all of that side pumped up. Now it's just like a balloon that's just lost its air. Dan Cox is no different, so he's got to. That's why I'm saying we got to be careful and watch out for the so-called October surprise. He's not going to take this laying down. He knows he's trailing in the polls. So look for him to pull something, say something, do something in the next few weeks.
Well, let's see what it's like. I said, it's kind of a lull. It was the denouement. Hopefully, there's some rising action and not this ain't the back end. It's going all the way to the end. But hopefully, again, I do have to respect what Westmore has done to win. It was looking back on it, it was a difficult primary because you had so many different personalities, and he wasn't the one who had all of the things. I mean, he didn't have a certain county or constituency. They challenged him on all that kind of nonsense. You talk about an October surprise, but he handled that very well. He positioned himself, and from what I understand, he benefited from the attack on him about this Baltimore, a lack of Baltimore connection, because it was not something that I think that people bought into. It was a attack that was, I guess it was legitimate because it's politics, and I don't see anything. Politics is what it is. It's warfare, and I guess what they say, all is fair in warfare or whatever. So, but the point is, he handled that, and it benefited him, and he continued to rise. So I guess I'm stuck on the fact that if he was able to orchestrate that and stay relevant, um, this general election might be in his hands also.
It could be, as long as he doesn't make any mistakes going forward. And I keep talking about the October surprise. So the other is competition is going to be watching, and they're going to be trying to find something. As you mentioned, they started earlier at it. They're going to try and find something that hopefully they think that will stick, that will turn the voters against him. What he has to do, he has to have a tremendous ground game going into the final week. He's got to get people to the polls. That's the biggest obstacle that's facing Westmore right now, because people sort of complacent. Like you said, they figured he's got it in the bag, so they may not show up to the polls. They may just say, okay, my man's got it. My one vote is not going to make a difference. And the opposition is they're banking on stuff like that. So Westmore's got to get his ground game going. He's got to get people out. He's got to have the voter crusades going. He's got to get the souls, the churches involved. He's got to do all of that. He's got to step it up in the next few weeks towards the end of the election. He's got to put it in first gear all the way.
Okay, you sound like somebody with some experience. So let me ask you: have you seen this before? I mean, you were in L.A. Were you in LA during the years when you had a black mayor there? You were in California when Willie Brown was
Yeah.
big. So is that the experience you're speaking from?
Yeah,
And
because I've been around a lot of politicians. Mayor Bradley, of course, and when he ran for mayor, and then we had these meetings with all, and this is part of being a journalist. They always include me in these meetings. And I'm trying to say I'm a journalist, but they trust me. So a lot of things I know and hear, they know I'm not going to get back the next day and report it on the radio. And I'll give you an example. We're in a meeting. It was a sit-in at the South African consulate. So they said they go in Beverly Hills. So I said, okay, I'm going to go up there, got my microphone, and call in what's going on. So at about 10 o'clock, the sit-in is going to start. So all the reporters are heading to the elevator to go down. So I'm going there, and the cop says, "This is it." Maxine Waters grabbed me and said, "No, he's with us." So I'm like, "Wait a minute! I'm not going to sit up here with these guys. They're going to do a sit-in. I got work to do, and I got to pick up my son at 3 o'clock." So I'm sitting there, and the conversation is about Tom Bradley,
Mhm.
and the fact that he was running for governor at the time, and the fact that he had not made an outreach to the black community, which all he had to do was come. And I hope West doesn't make this mistake. All Tom Bradley had to do was go to Watts, go to Oakland, going to the black because he thought that black people were going to vote for him because he was black. He lost by a slim margin to George Jugmasian. And
Mm.
one of the things that in that meeting at the South African Embassy when we were doing the sit-in, Maxine Waters and all the head of the clergy and they were saying, why can't we get Tom to come to the black community? You know, he thinks that black people are going to vote for him, and he hasn't showed up. And they said, well, we've talked to him. But his campaign manager says he's already got the black vote. You don't need to show up, da 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 da. He ended up losing by a thin margin. Had he listened to the black leaders, went into the black community, went into Watts, South Central, going to Oakland, parts of San Francisco, you know where we are, and just show up at a couple of rallies, he'd have been the first black governor of the state of California. And I say that, hopefully West does not make that mistake and think that just because he's black, the black people are going to turn up and vote for him.
Well, I do know that could have been part of the challenges of the first race with Anthony Brown. He basically gave his oversight of Baltimore City to local elected officials. I don't, the turnout in Baltimore is always kind of interesting. And again, he may have done the same thing in Prince George's County. But either way, one thing that we do know is that if people in Prince George's County and Baltimore City would have turned out, Hogan would not have won. So it could have been the same thing. Um, the
I
the
remember
the
that race. Yeah, you're right, because those were the complaints we were getting in D.C. about PG County. The people weren't showing up. There was a lack of enthusiasm on the black community in PG County, which is where we're close to in D.C. And I guess it was the same thing in Baltimore. Again, did not embrace the black community. So hopefully the Westmore won't do that.
Well, he again, I can tell you this, and this is before he was running, because I I didn't know him when the book came out, but in what I do here at the Park Heights Community Health Alliance, we created a reading room because there's no library in this neighborhood, and he and I have a mutual friend who knew what I was doing, so he wanted me to have books from Westmore's publisher, and he made it possible for us to get the book when we opened the reading room. We call it the Henrietta Lacks Reading Room and Bookshare here, and that's how I was first introduced to Westmore, and I didn't know who he was, and so at the time we were doing a annual 5K. We call it the Baltimore Road Race in Park Heights, and he came to the road race and ran in the race, and he came a couple of years after that. So our connection is based on him seeing the value of doing service in a community that he didn't. I don't think he didn't. Obviously, he didn't live here, but he had a passion for Black folks. And then during quarantine, he called us up and he delivered food through his organization for people who lived in this community. He did it in other places, but because of the relationship we had before, I was on the list. So I don't question his connection to Black folks. That's why when the news came out about his whatever you want to criticize about the perception of him saying that he was from Baltimore, I don't think he ever said that. But they never talked about the work he did because he was connected to Baltimore, and that's painful. It was painful because the real work that people do, you don't ever see it. In fact, when you get into the side of the business I work on, mitigating someone from being, having health challenges, mitigating or doing something that keeps someone from being murdered or murdering someone, or mitigating someone from being a teenage mother. You don't have There's no story about that. You know what I'm saying? The story is always the negative stuff on the back end, but the people who do the stuff on the front end, they don't. There's no award for that. There's no award.
Um,
So, but I like that you were in LA during that period, man, because a lot of stuff happened in LA. So the years from LA, you were there from what years to what years?
I got to LA Labor Day '76 because I remember we drove from New York to to LA. But one thing more about Westmore before we move on, though, he did come on our show, so we did interview him, and so he understands and recognizes the effect of black media, and he says he's going to come back before the election. So we'll see.
Mhm. Yeah, I again, I have to, in the role I play is kind of like yours. As much as the NAACP, of course, can't endorse candidates, and I wouldn't do that. But me personally, I'm sharing with you what my experience has been. Um, um, and then I have read everything I need to know about this Cock guy. And so, and Cock is bad, but his running mate is worse. We had issues with her because she literally made the former superintendent in Queen Anne's County, she made her life a living hell.
Mm.
And so that lady doesn't need to be anywhere near Annapolis. And I'll say that everywhere I go. And because I saw what she did during that period of time. So I hope that the race hasn't become about that. But I do think that if there's any strategy to be applied to talk about an October surprise, it should be the fact that the albatross around the neck of Delegate Cock is that his running mate is worse than he is, and he is worse than Trump. So with all of those ingredients, I hope that that could be that 50% or 53% that we're talking about. But I do want to.
Let me jump in and ask you this, though. That's important what you just mentioned, because right now the race has been pretty clean. Do you think that should be front and center? If you were Westmore, do you think that should be an issue? Should he be pounding that home?
Um, I don't think he has to, but the people need to know about it. Someone needs to do it. I mean, he's run. I mean, the primary was kind of clean.
Hmm.
This period, as you just addressed, has been kind of clean. And I think he can wind it in debates, of course, but it should be discussed. That lady's track record about what she calls leadership, because it's always good to have someone who's involved with the community because that gives you your credibility. But
Yeah,
her credibility is based on creating something called the Queen Anne's Patriots. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah,
Running of giving this her name is Andrea Kane, Dr. Andrea Kane,
yeah.
giving her the blues so much so that she left that position. And so if we're gonna celebrate people when they do good stuff in the community that makes them eligible to run for public office, I'm all for that. But when you do bad stuff, that should make you eligible to run. That made her eligible to run with a Trump supported gubernatorial candidate. So the world should know about that. I mean,
Mm.
I think everybody should know about that. And to your question, I don't think Westmore has to do it. The community can do it because she gave the community, and the issue was about Dr. Kane promoting diversity, equity, inclusion policies in Queen Anne's County, which were needed and also which were state regulation, but she attacked her, and the rest is history. And if that made her eligible to be on a ticket with this guy, then she should be the albatross around his neck.
Well, we'll see how it plays out. Maybe he's holding that as a trump card. No pun intended.
No, no
Uh,
pun intended.
when we get closer to the ballot day, to election day, because like right now, it's kind of clean, and and well, he probably feels he doesn't need it right now. You
Right.
know,
If I mean, like I said, I mean, as you recall, everybody criticized President Obama because he played it cool throughout
Mhm.
his election. He didn't hit back hard to John McCain or Sarah Palin during
Right.
that period, but when he had to, he did it. So I'm not, I don't want to compare um, Westmore to Barack Obama. Barack Obama is his own man, and Westmore is obviously his own man in his own place. But there is something to be said about the ability to keep your composure and respond to nonsense when you need to. And if you don't have to, then it gives you an opportunity to slide in a situation where you didn't alienate anyone. And to that end, I think that he's done a good job. I don't know anybody he's offended by his race in the primary or now. And again, I want to, address the attack on him. Even with that, he didn't come out slinging, and they knew who dropped the information. I never heard him say anything to expose that individual,
Mm,
which was a likely way of getting support in the primary, which he should have. I do think that all Democrats who ran in the primary should be supporting him now. I haven't seen that lineup. Hopefully,
mm,
there's some backroom stuff going on that they will close it out, and that could be the October surprise.
mm.
I know that he has kind of reconciled to some extent, whether it's political or not. He's reconciled the problems that unions had with him, and I do know that he's met with them. I think they've come out in support of him, and that's a good thing.
Well, again, and it's leading in the polls. So what you do when you're playing a game? You talked about football earlier. You're leading, so you want to protect that lead. You don't want to do anything that's going to jeopardize the lead. You don't want to fumble. At the 2-minute mark, and I think that's what he's doing. He's being very protective. That's why he's not going out of his way, because, like you said, he really doesn't need that. But that's still part of the ammunition that he has in case he has to need it, or he has a surrogate who can do it for him. So it's not like coming from him directly.
I would say surrogates plural because everybody can't do that.
Right.
Everybody's not made out of that. And I'll also say that in another analogy, because this happened to me one time. I've only won one race. I'm a runner. I do 5Ks. I do
Okay.
marathons, and I only won one of those races. And the one I won, luckily, I had this thought like, what would I win? What would my feeling be if I'm ahead and I can't see anybody behind me?
Right. Right.
So that's a skill, right? And
Yes, it is.
I think that he's uniquely qualified for that. You're talking about someone who's been a star with his history of how he got to a military school, with his history that he celebrates because he has. I don't even wear a class ring, but he wears a class ring, and the class ring he wears, even though he's a Rhodes Scholar and all this, and went to Johns Hopkins, well, his class ring is the ring from the community college that he went to, because I think he had an associate's degree when he came out of Valley Forge or something.
Mhm.
I forget how he acquired it, but my point is that's a unique individual, and I'm hoping that personality is 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 a separate skill from someone who doesn't have to work to catch up with someone, but someone who has the experience of being ahead and determining how to stay ahead. And like I said, that's a unique skill.
We're just talking politics, and politics is a cold game, as you already know. And the thing is, what the black community is going to be asking of Wes Moore, what are you going to do for us? And I'm not sure if he's had that question put to him. Do you support reparations? You probably get that put to him, because then the other side will say, oh, he supports reparations. And they can say, hey, he just wants to help black people. So he's got to walk that thin line, kind of like what Obama did when you were running these statewide elections, because there's a whole other group, because they think for some reason when there's a black candidate, people think that black candidate, all he's going to do is take care of his people. They don't never think like that when it's somebody else. So
Right.
for Wes and any other statewide candidate, they've got to remember that. And the question, I know some black folks are saying, oh, Wes, if I vote for you, what are you going to do for us? Do you know if that question's been put to him yet?
Right. Well, I know it has been because that was a tough question in the primary, because I give credit to the chair of the Legislative Black Caucus, and I never saw this before.
Mm,
And what he did at his fundraiser, I don't even think he primed them for this question, but he made sure all of uh, the gubernatorial candidates was at his fundraiser, and
Okay.
he got up and he did this speech, had everybody listening in, like, what is he talking about? And what he did was he said, I'm going to invite all of the gubernatorial candidates who are here up to speak, and I want them to tell us what their black agenda is.
Mm,
And
mm,
so, so let me tell you, I had never seen that before,
yeah.
and that kind of made things come together for um, for a tone that was set in that primary, because it was the case, and we now know that the endorsements, and I don't know why the endorsement happened. That's not the point of this question, but it forced someone like the current comptroller, Peter Franchot, to
Hmm.
stabilize a black agenda. And I have to believe that because he stabilized it, that some of these African American leaders in Prince George's County, there was a few of them, endorsed him, and there were some in Baltimore City rallying for him. I'm not saying it was right or wrong for them to do that, but I am saying that I believe that the turning point to bring the advocacy as a center of a lot of these election or campaigns was because of that fundraiser that was in Prince George's County. Now, um, all that to be said, that it's on the table. I think that you can justify healing the challenges caused by whatever years of white supremacy and all of that, broken social determinants. Because of that, you can justify it any kind of way. So, again, I'm going to lean, hopefully, that he has the ability, he has the team to be able to say, this is why I'm making this decision, if it has to do with a conversation about reparations, because we're restoring hope for people and making, this state better. Because if we have a bunch of poor people in this state because of these past transgressions, we're going to always have a bunch of poor people in the state. But if we can make them solvent, we have people who are taxpayers. We have people who can be active in community and, take care of their children, take care of these communities, and it can be turned around. So hopefully he'll have someone who can he can be that person, and we'll see.
Right. And the question of what is he going to do for Baltimore City, Baltimore and Baltimore City? Because right now you talked about the tax base. The tax base in Baltimore City has been eroded. That's why there's a shortage of jobs and businesses in Baltimore City. So, one of the major questions, I think, the next time I talk to him, what is your plan to reinvigorate Baltimore City economically?
Right. And I think we know now. I mean, it's in retrospect, but the reality is that had Governor Hogan went forth with the red line, the west side of Baltimore City would be much different right now. And it's unfortunate he didn't do it. He made a political decision not to do it. I guess because it was something that was in place that he didn't want to rectify. It was something that would benefit unions and black folks and all that,
Mm,
but he didn't do it. It crippled. It continued to allow the west side to go down. It didn't extend transportation opportunities for people to get the job somewhere else. That's what you do large scale public works projects for. You do it for the end goal, which is you extend the transportation opportunities. But on the way to doing that, you create jobs for people. The housing in that area would have been enhanced. Housing values would have gone up. All these details did not happen, and he made a specific decision based on why he did it. He made that decision, and here we are.
I'm glad you mentioned that because those are taxpayers' money. And as you know, there's a lot of apathy in the black community when it comes to going to the polls. A lot of people think that it doesn't matter. We've elected so many people ahead of them. And using Baltimore City as an example, look at all the mayors and we've elected, and nothing has happened. In fact, the city's gotten worse. So, but they don't understand that if you pay taxes, and you probably do if you in America, you pay taxes. The money that's used to fix up schools, roads, bring business to your community, that's your money. And
Right.
you should not give that up and let somebody else make that decision for you. So I'm just saying that for all the folks who are apathetic of being felt they've been burnt with these previous candidates, why they're going to stay home and they don't feel that politics works for Black people.
Well, and the other thing is the collective opportunities should be replaced. You mentioned that some of the job loss, um, they everybody goes back to the story about Baltimore was a city of 900,000 people one time. Well, I think it's what is it 500,000 now?
Mm,
That's a lot of vacant houses. There's a
yes,
lot of
yes.
schools that are not full. There's a lot of taxes not being paid to support the infrastructure. And so we come to this, and I'm not going to blame it totally on the reduction of population. Well, I guess I can, because I do believe that if this city was majority white, you wouldn't have the challenges with the school systems that you have. You certainly wouldn't have a challenge with an infrastructure that allowed for basically people to be set up to be poisoned with E. coli virus.
Um,
All this stuff is important when it comes down to the details of who you have in a solvent city. And a solvent city shouldn't be based on the fact that a certain race of people are in the city, but it is, because this contempt we have for young African American children is heartbreaking. The contempt we have for seniors in this community is devastating. And that's really who we should be protecting. We should be protecting young people. We should be trying to motivate them, and we should be. It should be clear that our support and giving safe homes and safe communities to senior citizens or elders in our community should be of value. But we've lost that because there's no in the middle to fortify families to be in communities to be the density that protects folks, and that's just the way it's played out.
Another issue too that hopefully, if he wins, he'll try to burnish the reputation of a Baltimore city. It's been tarnished by the movies. The two shows I'm talking about. We Run the City, The Wire, and that's how people outside and inside Baltimore see Baltimore City. And there's a lot of talented, very talented people in Baltimore City who could do a show and get it on about, it doesn't necessarily have to be filmed in Baltimore, but just can be Baltimore centric, if you will. That it's the setting is about Baltimore, but it's positive. So I think that will help too with the image of the city.
Well, I mean, there's enough talent. I mean, you talk about talent.
Yeah.
Um, there's enough talent and talented people who are doing great things throughout, in Hollywood and all this type of thing. And more importantly, the history of Baltimore for Black people is significant. Philadelphia stole this, I'll say, from Baltimore. But Philadelphia had a campaign years ago, and they say Black history starts in Philadelphia. Now, I get it, but when you talk about Philadelphia and history starting there, the first thing they turn to is Richard Allen and the AME Church. That's one of the first things. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying that's the only thing, because there were a lot of liberated Black folks in Philadelphia living as free people in Philadelphia before that. Richard Allen, as you know, was a free African man. But here's the thing: when you turn it to discussion about the AME Church and its foundation. And I'm an AME, so this is not a knock on the AME Church and their embrace of being the first Black denomination. The reality is that Bethel AME in Baltimore City preceded the AME denomination. So if you want to talk about where Black history begins, we
Yeah.
can talk about Baltimore. And more importantly, and one thing that's often overlooked by everybody, if you're not a Black Catholic, it might not come as something that we know about, is the legacy and history, talking about Haiti also, because Mother Mary Lang came from Haiti when they kicked the French out, and she ended up in Baltimore City.
Mm.
She got here because of the dynamics of French, I don't know if you call it enslavement, servitude, or whatever. She wasn't necessarily enslaved, but for whatever reason, she was as a servant. But when they got here, they were freer than the black people who were here, and they had the autonomy to establish the Oblate Society, and they also created the Order of the Black Catholic Bishops. I forget what they call those. But the most significant thing she did that has been long standing is it complements the Oblate Society was that she established, founded St. Francis Academy for Black children, and that high school, I guess it's just high school now, is the longest running Black educational institution, at least in America. I would say the world, but it's certainly the longest serving Black educational system or school in the United States, and it's in Baltimore,
Yeah.
and it's beside the prison. It's all these things that you say, what good can come out of that? Well, that's one of them. And in addition to that, and what's more heartbreaking is that for whatever reason, because we had Mother Teresa who's been sainted, and we have John Paul the Eighth or whatever his name. He's been died and been sainted automatically. Mother Mary Lang's canonization is still on the desk, on the table at the Pope. I don't know how that works, but unfortunately, she hasn't been celebrated, hasn't been sainted, and it's way past due. But there's a strong movement of folks trying to make that happen, and I hope that it happens. I hope it happens soon, but I certainly hope that some of the folks who've been working on it for years can see it in their lifetime. So that's all in Baltimore. Now, I want to pivot out because you said 1976 you got to LA.
Yeah,
That was a lot of that's around the time that Magic Johnson showed up, wasn't it?
that's right.
And so you saw the high flying LA
Oh
Lakers.
yeah. And one of the things with our radio station, we were right in the community, and those players were at our station all the time. We didn't carry the Lakers, but the Lakers carried us because the players, they could relate to us. It was the sports station carried the games. But any given day, the program director, in fact, is this stadium announcer or the announcer of the arena, Lawrence Tanner, LT. He was our program director at the time. We had access to the Lakers more. They were playing at the Forum.
Right.
And
The
so
fabulous forum. You gotta say the
yeah,
fabulous forum.
the Fabulous Forum, and we had access. We even go to practices. Other members of the media couldn't go to practices. They said, "Oh, let them in." So we were just part of the fabric, and saw that whole Showtime thing. In the locker room before games, after games, before the rest of the press. They wanted to have. And here's the other part too. When teams came in, I remember Philadelphia came in one year. I remember Boston came in. Those players, they came by our station. Dr. J, Moses Malone. I'm thinking of can't think of the names right now. I'm seeing their faces, but they all came by because they knew the bets and all of that. Talking about the game was going to be on our radio station. When Stevie bought the station, he says he didn't want the station to be a jukebox, and he looked at me and says, "This is where you come in. We've got to be in the community." So as news director, we were all over the place. So, one time I had like 7 people covering sports for us. We had pro, we had college, and we had high school. And then we had a bunch of interns. But we were all over the place. That was just sports. But we cut everything else in news. We were all over. When something happened in LA, we're the first person to get a call. Marvin Gaye got shot. I remember I'm at home. And
that was my next question. Where were you?
I was home. And we had a DJ is working weekends, and he was the weekend guy, so he was kind of new. So the people at California Hospital downtown LA called him to tell him to call me. That Marvin Gaye got shot. I said, "Oh man, they're pulling your leg, man, because they know you're new. They think you're gonna fall for that, man." Oh man, I hung up on it.
So you didn't believe it?
Nah, because it was April 1st. So this is, hey man, they're pulling your leg, man. Somebody, one of them guys at the station had one of these girls call you, man. And I hung up, and he called, "No, man, I got 2 or 3 calls saying that Marvin got shot. Marvin got shot." So I turned around, turned on the radio, said Marvin got shot. So I was down there in a flash. And we started reporting live from there. And that was the difference because other stations, they wait till it's got to be Monday through Friday when you do news, or you do news at 10. What Stevie had us do, whenever, whatever, wherever there's news, you're on it. So, like I told you, he says, the radio station is not a jukebox. And that's where we came in. If there's news, if there's a holdup, there's something going on in our community, we're on it right away. You just pick up the phone, call in. It's only about 2 or 3 minutes. That's as long as a commercial. So that was his idea.
So he had the vision. Um,
Yeah.
that's good stuff.
And
So
speaking of vision, he called it radio vision. You
all
know,
right.
this is a conception. This is radio vision. Watch with your ears, because he says, we sighted people, we see things differently than how people without sight see. So you've got to remember when you're on the air to remember how to paint those pictures.
Wow, that's amazing, man. I that's amazing because I didn't know. You can share with everybody here that Stevie Wonder had a radio station. I
Oh
didn't
yeah,
know.
he still got it.
That's
He's
amazing.
doing well. And we went through a lot of other stuff. We even the King Holiday, you know, with that because the first time I met him, he called me up because he heard of what I did in New York, and he called me up. He says, "I bought a radio station. I need to become the news director. I need to put on the news department." I says, "Okay," and he says, "I want you to come by the station. I want you to show the station." And so people would think, because he's blind, and all that. But being around him, you never think he's blind. And so I
That's
remember.
that's what I hear about him and Ray Charles.
Yeah, you see, he goes to the bathroom by himself at his house. He walks around. He'll pick up the phone. He knows where everything else. But he called me. I remember it was Thanksgiving Day, Black Friday, and he says, "You gonna do Black Friday?" I said, "I don't do Black Friday, man." He says, "Come by the station, and I need to talk to you." Up there, and it was him and Herbie Hancock, and he says, "This is what we want to do. As soon as you get this news department going, we want to get a holiday for Dr. Martin Luther King." And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, Ronald Reagan just got elected, and we know how he kicked our butts in California. We expect him to do the same thing. And he says, "Are you down?" I said, "Yeah, I'm down." I said, "Okay, if he's down, I'm down." And him and Herbie Hancock were there at the time, and that's how. And this is a whole nother story. But apart from going there every day and doing news and covering stuff, we had to get that bill. There were times I go to the station and says, "Hey, we need you in San Francisco. Go to LAX. You got a flight going to SFO. There's a rally across the Golden Gate Bridge." There were things like that would happen. Every day I get to work at 6 o'clock. Hey, we need to go someplace. You need to go to San Diego. We need to go to Sacramento. And this was in addition to just doing the regular news. This was trying to get people to understand that we want a holiday for Martin Luther King. And let me just say, because the people, and Steve don't like me talk about it, he did a lot. He put his career on hold for like 2 years to get this bill passed. People don't understand. Without him, there'd have been no holiday.
Well, how was your connection with L.A. and you just mentioned San Francisco?
Uh-huh.
My man is Willie Brown for obvious
Yeah,
reasons.
yeah. Because Willie's the consummate politician. That's what you learn about politics. You want to know, if you want to study politics, study Willie Brown. Every black person elected in the state of California has to go through either Willie Brown's school. There was two schools in L.A. There was Bradley and Mervyn Dinley at the time. Mervyn Dinley ended up being a congressman, but all of them came through Willie Brown. They all had. It was like a school. You run for city council, then you run for the state senator. All of that as Speaker of the Assembly. But you go through Willie Brown. He taught them well. He's one of the smartest guys out there when it comes to politics.
Yeah, he has a lot. I mean, Congressman Waters,
Yeah,
uh,
Steve
Kamala,
Kellis, he tutored her. All of
yes,
those all of the people who came out of California that you see on the national level, he tutored them. They went through his school.
mhm. Yeah, no, I read his biography and it changed my life completely about my how you should position for politics.
Yes,
Because it's if you don't have game, you ain't gonna be in the game.
right.
So,
And he has major game.
oh, he's amazing,
Yes.
really amazing. But yeah, well, the other question I have, because you were there as a build up to the '84 Olympics, Summer Olympics
Yeah.
as well. And that was a historic piece because it introduced a lot of things, more particularly Carl Lewis to the world.
Yeah.
he killed him. And I think who was the gymnast that was renowned during that period? I can't remember. It was
I'll tell you that I went to the Olympics because you figured the Olympics come for every 4 years. They're coming back to LA, I think maybe in 4 years' time as well. But when they were there, we went there, we covered the Olympics, and just the media process alone that you have to go through. It's like getting credentials to cover the White House. And I've been through that too. They go through the whole background, fingers, this is before 9/11 for the Olympics, because you're going to be around all these athletes. And the 84 Olympics, I remember vividly watching the track and field games in the Coliseum, talking to some of the athletes. We talked about U.S. athletes and all the black athletes, because that's where we were coming from. We let our listeners know, we're all the same. We may speak a little differently, and we're in different colors, but basically all the African, the Caribbean countries, some of the black athletes run for Europe. We put them on the radio.
Well, you have that, and then you have the buildup. You get Bradley elected mayor, and then his downfall was 1992 with the
Right.
with the
Rodney King after the beating. Yeah, Rodney King, after Rodney King, because Tom Bradley supposedly had the city on check. If something happened, he's supposed to let us know. He didn't know, but because of the talk show that we did on the air then, it was called Front Page, we knew exactly that something was going to pop off. We did not know it was going to be at Florence and Normandy, the intersection of Florence and Normandy in South Central, because people call up and they were frustrated. And it wasn't about Rodney King's beating. It was about Latasha Hollings,
right,
who got shot in the back of the head for Sun Zaju, because she claimed that she had stole some orange juice, and she shot her in the back of the head. The Rodney King verdict was the proverbial camel that broke the straw that broke the camel's back. There was a buildup, and it just like a crescendo happened right after those officers were found not guilty.
And we thought that was bad. We thought the riots were bad, but then we have, I guess, the real closeout was 1994, and what we saw with O.J. Simpson.
Yeah, and one of the things with that trial, again, as I mentioned, we were part of the fabric of the community. Johnny Cochran called into our show every morning. Johnny Cochran was listening, and that made the rest of the media listen to hear what he was saying. And I'll share one thing is. The previous day, he went to Chris Darden, and hey man, nice tie. I said, Johnny, what was that about? Because I know, Johnny just did. He says, man, they were kicking our butts. I just had to do something to throw him off his game. I said, you sure did. Because after that, Marsha Clark came back and finished the question, and he couldn't figure it out. And then later on, when they asked Darden, he's like, Johnny Cochran complimented me on my tie. And he figured out he got beat because he was sitting there instead of figuring out how to what the next question to ask. He was wondering, why did Johnny compliment me on my tie? Because Johnny's an impeccable dresser. If you know Johnny, see how he dresses. And so he was like, man, I must have arrived. Johnny complimented, but Johnny says he needed to buy some time. So he told us that the next day, and then Dodd says, man, he got us. But the whole trial, and when OJ got released. We got the first interview with Juice. I mean, the studio was packed. Johnny came down the day after the verdict. He was in our studio. Then it took Juice a few days to come down because he didn't want to do any interviews. So Johnny says, listen, call him, tell him I told you to come down. I said, listen, OJ, we got some ladies, some little black old ladies who are at that courthouse in the rain, just like your mama, supporting you. You need to come on the radio and just thank them. And he said, oh, man, if you put it like that, I got to. And he came and he just thanked the folks for supporting him. But he said, I couldn't have done it without the black community.
Right. And then he didn't go to the Million Man March.
No. But he made a lot of promises he didn't keep. Right. I guess he got caught up in the moment, and that was that.
Yeah, I think he thought it was going to be business as usual after this. And he can never go back. So, hey, man, I want to thank you for dropping in here. It has been a wonderful experience. I got to hear some more of these LA stories because, again, you got the inside stuff. You've commented about the Natasha Brown piece. And the reason I wanted to bring that up, I'm glad you highlighted it, was because that information didn't make it to the East Coast. It wasn't, mainstream news.
Yeah.
What we saw was because it was national news when the beating happened for Rodney King. And so much so, I remember very vividly, and I woke up to it, that President Bush was like, "This is terrible. This is horrible. This is whatever." I was like, "Wow."
Well, let
this
me
is,
share something here real quickly because I know we run out of time. We were on the air during all of this, and then this is we're at the station for like 3 days during the riots, and there was no traffic. And then we looked down, and somebody called and says, "Hey, the president's limo is coming down Crenshaw." We're on Crenshaw. Our studios, you can look out to the street, and the car came down, the motorcade came down. He was about to slow down, like he was going to stop at the station. And one of the callers, we had a call on hold, and we were actually speaking to a caller. The caller just lashed and slapped Bush down about whether he's part of the problem and all of this, and white supremacy and systemic racism. Bush's people, that limo just kept on going. It's rolled out. I know he didn't want to know parts of that.
well, I coincidentally, the Bushes lived in Compton.
Yes, they did at one time. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
read that during 1992. That I didn't know the reality about oil at the time, but so
Yeah.
it made sense later. But yeah, they lived somewhere around Normandy, and so. But hey, man, we can do this again anytime.
Yeah. Sure.
Hopefully we can connect. I certainly like these stories, and I look forward to being on your show at any time you have possible.
All
So,
right. We'll do that for sure. Willie, love to have you on 1010 WOLB.
all right, thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you. Have a good one.
All right, peace,
All right.
man. Take
Peace.
care.
All right.